summer of 2012, I went on a mission trip to Nicaragua with a nonprofit organization called Bridges to Community, and I went with my dad, and we went and we got to Nicaragua, and we drove about 3 hours into a remote village, and we lived in the school ground. Every day we would wake up at like 7, go and build. We all got assigned a house that prior to working in Nicaragua, we had to raise a certain amount of money for all the materials that we were going to use to build the house. Every day when we were in Nicaragua, we would wake up at 7, go to the site with some workers who lived there. We would mix cement. We literally did everything from scratch. They don't have any bulldozers, any technology there that would help move it along. We mixed pavement, mixed gravel, laid bricks, had to cut wires, literally built a house for a family of 5 from scratch, but it was a 1-story house with 3 rooms. We did that every day, and then in the afternoon we would come back, have a lunch break, then go back from 5 to 8. And then when we get home at 8, we'd come and we'd eat dinner with everyone who lived in the village and their family, because the village that we were living in was a super family-oriented village. We weren't allowed to not all eat together. And then there was a couple days that we had off. We went into town and we would go shopping and see the village, or go out to eat there and see different things. And then that was pretty much the whole week. But at the last day of the week, we had finally left the village and we were going to stay at a hotel for the last day. And everyone was excited. We were going to get pizza, our first real meal, because all we ate during this whole week was rice and beans that they made. And it's definitely not sanitary, but we had to eat it to be polite. So there was definitely a lot of stomach issues throughout the trip. So this was an exciting meal, to say the least. So I was walking with my friends, and I was walking on the sidewalk, and I was actually looking up because the person who was running our trip was telling us just some background about the city of Masaya, where we were. And there was all these sneakers hanging from the wires at the top of the road. And the leader of us told us that the sneakers were hanging from the wires because it was for drug dealers to know where to meet people to sell them drugs. So it was like a marker. So I was looking up at that while stepping down into the road, and I happened to step down into a sewage hole that had broken bars over it that were rusty and formed a perfect hole. And my leg went immediately through it. I was in there up to my thigh, and I didn't feel anything. I just started laughing, and I was like, oh my gosh, that would happen. And I got up, started to walk, and one of my friends who's more Indian colored literally looked white when they looked at my leg, and I was like, oh. And then my other friend started throwing up, so I was a little bit confused. So I looked down at the back of my leg, and there is literally a gash in the back of it, and it looked like a piece of pizza with no cheese, is how I always describe it. So I started throwing up when I saw it, and I actually turned and threw up all over my dad, who was trying to help me. And so I was laying in the middle of the street waiting for help. There was all these local people around me, crowding over me, yelling at me in Spanish and taking pictures of me, because they thought it was so interesting that an American got hurt and was getting care. They were all making fun of me, and everyone else was just trying to help me. So they finally an ambulance got there, and I was relieved for a little bit. But then the ambulance was just people who were my age, had no idea what to do. They were trying to wrap around my leg and keep pressure on it because they didn't know what to do. They were just there supporting me to transport me to the hospital. Then when I got to the hospital, it was all outdoors, and there was only one doctor, and all the people ahead of me were people with IVs, and they were half asleep. They were all just had alcohol poisoning. That's what they were getting treated for. So I waited about 2 hours before anyone would see me, and finally this doctor let me in. There was blood all over the table from the person before me that they didn't clean up. And the doctor just immediately cleaned out my cut super intensely, like without even warning me, didn't care about the pain. I was screaming. Then he stuck some Novocaine shots straight in the cut, which is probably the worst pain I've ever had in my life. And then he stitched like 14 stitches into my leg and just sent me home and was like, okay, you can take out the stitches, or your dad can in like 2 weeks. You'll be fine. Just take them out, let it heal. Like, gave me no specific instructions, no pain medication, nothing. So luckily the next day I got to America. My leg was still numb, so I didn't feel anything on the plane ride. But then the next day I woke up in just like agonizing pain. Like, I thought my leg was falling off. So I went to the hospital in the middle of the night the day I got home, and they were all just very concerned. They were like, how did you get sent home like this? Like, I had an infection called cellulitis. Like, if it's not treated in 4 days, you have to get your leg cut off. And so they immediately undid all my stitches and just cleaned it, just rubbed it with so much rubbing alcohol and cleaned my leg, re-stitched it, gave me medication, and they kept me in the hospital for a couple of days, and because they just said, like, this is over the top, like, you should not be let out of watch right now, you have such a bad infection. And the doctor actually made it worse because he just was not careful about cleaning it in any way. So I had about 2 weeks in the summer where I was just on bed rest. I had an at-home nurse come, and she would clean my cut, then she would pack it. It was partly stitched, but some of the stitches were out, so she would pack it with like cotton and leave the cotton in my cut with this absorbing cleaning stuff that was just constantly cleaning my cut, but it just hurt so bad and was so uncomfortable to pull out because it would dry, and then I'd have to pull it out and repack it. So that went on for a couple weeks, and then actually it was probably about 4 months before my leg completely healed and before I stopped having to go to the hospital at least twice a week, and before I could do anything athletically. It wasn't until I went on this trip in the beginning of August, and I don't think it was December until I was allowed to run or do anything. And now I just have a scar, and it's pretty noticeable. People ask about it. The only thing I have to do is protect it with sunscreen, but I got really lucky because I didn't cut a tendon, and I was really close, according to the doctors, to I could have lost a lot of function in my leg or had to get it cut off, but because of the medical care we have here, they literally in 2 days turned around my infection, I would say, and with the cleaning and the at-home nurses, I completely kept it up, but it was definitely a long journey, but now it's okay, and my leg is completely healed, and it's a great story to have.